I'm here today to talk to you about the power of the question and how you can ask the right questions and actually grow your podcast. So, let me ask you a question. Now, what just happened internally inside of you is a biological response. Your ears might have perked up. You might have actually even leaned forward a little bit. Your pupils might have dilated because questions actually hijack the brain. Your brain actually shifts from whatever else it's thinking about to the question, and you'll likely not be able to think about anything else but that question. And this could be a very powerful tool for podcasters. Now, before I get started, I just want to introduce myself. I'm Travis, and I'm the inventor of pod decks. Now, if you don't know what pod decks are unique interview questions and episode starting prompts in the palm of your hand. And I'm also the founder of Podcast Buddy, a podcast editing agency where we help podcasters of all sizes, and we do the dirty work for you. You have fun recording the episode, and we edit, mix, master, write show notes, schedule, and publish the podcast on your behalf. Now, more important than anything, I am actually a podcaster. I've had so many podcasts in the last 10 years, but my last podcast that I've been doing and just throwing myself into is called Podcast Therapy. And it's for podcasters. It's to help keep your head in the game. So I invite you to come sit on my virtual podcast therapy couch and learn tips and tricks and hacks and anything that I can share with you to help you grow your podcast. Because my mission in life is to help as many podcasters as I can find their voice, grow their audience, and start their very own movement. So the question that I was going to ask you was, are you able to overcome the challenges that you're going to face as a podcaster? These are the 3 challenges, and I'm going to talk to you about them today. It's finding your voice, making great podcasts, and of course, growing your audience. So we're going to talk about these 3 things today, and I'm going to share with you how you can use questions to overcome all 3. All right, let's talk about finding your voice. So I'm not talking about finding your Arnold impersonation. I'm talking about finding your unique, authentic voice as a podcaster. So there's 1 million podcasts on Apple Podcasts, and only 250,000 have released an episode in the last 90 days. That stat actually came from Rob at Libsyn.com, which means 75% of podcasters fail. They quit. Now, we all know there's a lot that goes into a podcast episode. You have to have the technology set up. You have to schedule interviews. You have to record the interviews, edit the interview, write show notes, publish it, promote it. There's so much that goes into a single podcast episode. But I don't think that that's the reason podcasters quit. I think they quit because they never find their authentic voice. So I wanted to share with you a way that you can bypass and accelerate finding your authentic voice so you can sustain your podcast. So let's talk about Arnold again. I'm sure we all have a great Arnold impersonation, but Arnold didn't become Mr. Olympia 7 times in a row by lifting that little tiny weight a few times. Arnold put in the reps. So you need to put in reps to find your authentic voice. You need to put in the reps to find your groove and to find your authentic self and your own unique style. So, how do you put in reps without overwhelming yourself and end up burning out and quitting? So here's my challenge to you. Go live, all right? By going live, you take out most of the hard part of podcasting, which is setting up your microphone, editing, writing show notes, publishing, all the things that kind of bog you down. And at the end of it, if you don't like it, it'll dissolve in 24 hours anyway. So no one even has to know. And if it's good, hey, keep it around. So I've interviewed hundreds of people on my Instagram Live over the last 6 months. I've grown my Instagram account from 0 to 3,500 very quickly. And I get a ton of engagement, and I get a ton of people who beg me to go live and ask me, when are you going live next? Because they love that portion of what I'm doing. And it's allowed me to go on and interview strangers because I believe that every person has a unique story or skill or tip that they can share. And I've developed a skill to be able to talk to anyone and extract that information. So my challenge to you is, if you're overwhelmed by the thought of your next podcast episode, and if you're overwhelmed about thinking about pod fading, I want you to just start going live and start doing the reps, building that podcast muscle, okay? All right, next up is creating great episodes. By making great episodes, you'll keep your subscribers, you'll grow your audience, you'll do all the things we want to do as podcasters. And that starts by engaging your guest. So like I said, I've actually edited thousands of podcasts, and I studied them. I started to figure out which episodes did the best. I started to figure out what were the outliers of every one of my clients' interviews and my own interviews. And before I tell you what that is, there's the number one rule for interviewing people on a podcast is that you actually have to be interested in what people are saying. So I've edited a lot of podcasts where the interviewer actually talked more than the guest. And that's fine. If you've got something you need to share, then you should just record a solo cast. But you genuinely have to be interested in the other person to have a great episode. Now, you also need to learn how to listen. So listening is going to give you the next question. So as someone's sharing something with you and you're listening, you can develop what the next question is to go into that conversation. And you need to use unique questions. Now, there's a reason that unique questions are going to take you to the next level, and I'm going to share with you the anatomy of a great question, but you need to set yourself apart from the crowd, and there's a lot of podcasters that are only using small talk, and that doesn't make for a great episode. The way to make a great episode is to go deeper, okay? By going deeper, you peel back the onion, right? Everyone's an onion, and you peel back the layers as an interviewer with respect. And the more people share, the more they trust you, and the more vulnerable they'll be. And when you elicit an emotional response from your guest, you'll also elicit an emotional response from your listener. So here's a quick way to go deeper. And this is a reason that Joe Rogan and Mark Maron and Dax Shepard are all on the top charts of the podcast all the time, is because they actually share their own vulnerabilities with their guests. So, yes, we all like to stand at the top of the mountain and say, we're the best. But all the obstacles we've overcome in our lives are what make us unique. And by sharing those vulnerabilities, you'll earn trust of your guest, and they will share vulnerabilities. So just remember this. If you ask the same boring questions, you're going to get the same boring answers. So, Travis, what makes a great question? I'm glad you asked, because my next slide is actually the anatomy of a great question. I love to use the iceberg as the example because the tip of the iceberg is what I would consider to be small talk. How is the weather where you are? How are you doing today? What's new? Things like that just generally will spark that we're actually having a conversation. Now, when you go a little bit deeper, you hit the icebreaker. This is where the iceberg comes out of the ocean. And icebreaker questions are great because they really start to let you get to know someone and build trust. So, what is something I'd never guess about you? What would you do if you had to take all but 3 apps off your iPhone? Which would you keep? Things like that. But what really makes a great episode are the deep talk questions, the bottom of the iceberg. What moment in your life did you feel misunderstood? This is going to give somebody the opportunity to become vulnerable and have a deep conversation. Let's use the example of an author. I'm interviewing an author that just released a book. I could say, congratulations on your book release. Why did you decide to write a book? And that would be what I consider to be a very surface level question. But if I want to do deep talk with this guest and ask them a question that no one else is asking them, I could say, congratulations on releasing your book. Was there ever a time that you felt like quitting? Was there ever a huge obstacle that you had to overcome to actually get this book out? So now I'm giving them an opportunity to say, yes, I struggled so bad with this, and this is how I overcame it. And now you're making a great episode. So remember, go deeper and create iceberg deep talk questions. All right, so I talk to podcasters all day long. I want to help as many podcasters as possible. So I ask them, what's the number one thing you want as a podcaster right now? And they all say the same thing. They don't say, I want a new microphone. They don't say, I want the Rodecaster Pro. They say, I want to grow my audience. I want more downloads. So let's talk about how we can use questions in order to grow our audience. So first of all, where do you go to promote your episode? You go to social media because that's where the people are. Now, I see people posting as much as they can. They think, if I'm the loudest, I'm going to get the most attention. If I'm the squeaky wheel, I'll get the oil. But you oftentimes just become white noise, right? People are they see it everywhere and it just becomes white noise. And they all post the same thing because I study this and I keep track of this. They post this: check out my latest episode. Episode 7 is live. Are you ready for the new episode? Now, while that's all great and dandy, you're not really asking yourself an important question, which is, what's in it for them? So I want you to use the human-to-human method. My favorite author, Alan Dibb, wrote a book called The One-Page Marketing Plan. I highly recommend it. It simplifies marketing for anything. But the human-to-human method makes you realize that there's a person on the other side of all those accounts, right? 2 ears, 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, and feelings. So if you don't talk to people online like you would in real life, you're not going to make a human-to-human connection. Could you imagine I'm walking with you down the street, we run into Chris from Podfest, and I say, hey, this is my friend Tom. And you say, check out my latest episode, subscribe, rate, and review. That would be ridiculous, right? You would never do that. What you would do is you would talk to Chris, you'd make a little bit of small talk, you'd find out your commonalities, and then you'd say, by the way, I love Podfest, and I actually am a podcaster. I have a podcast. And he would say, well, what's it about? And then you can tell him what's in it for him, right? Every time you're pitching your podcast, every time you're pitching an episode, you need to tell people what's in it for them. In this episode, I'm going to tell you the meaning of life. In this episode, I'm going to share with you how I grew a 0 to 6-figure business in the ketogenic diet industry, right? You want to share with people why they should listen to that specific episode, not just let them know there is an episode, okay? So when we talk about social media, what's the first word that comes to mind? The algorithm, right? The evil algorithm. I hear people talk about how Mark Zuckerberg changed the algorithm, or the algorithm isn't showing my posts, okay? So I want to help you defeat the algorithm. So in a really quick fashion, the algorithm is based on likes, comments, subscriptions, interactions, and engagements. That's what's going to propel your post to be at the top of the feed. So how do we defeat the algorithm with questions? Well, by asking your audience a question, you give them a platform or a place to share their voice. And that typically comes in the form of a comment. Now, I ask a question of the day on my Poddex Instagram all the time, and I get tons of interaction. And I also get to learn about my audience. So I'll ask a question, and the comments roll in. What I do is I like their comments, more engagement. Then I will respond to their comments, more interaction, which causes them to comment. And now we're having conversations. And that's what's going to get your post seen. And it's going to give your audience the truth that you're actually a person and you have feelings and thoughts, and they have feelings and thoughts. And now you're having conversations and it's more magnetic, and you can defeat the dreaded algorithm. The other way that you can do this is simply giving your audience a chance to participate in your podcast. So what episodes did you like the most? You can start to curate more content that they want. Did you like the episode where I talked about podcasting, or did you like the episode where I talked about my small business, right? And then you can start to make more content that they want to hear. Let them be part of your journey, not just a passenger. All right, so I want to share with you 2 incredible hacks that I use all the time to grow my audience. And I've gone from 0 to 3,500 people in a very short time. And I've made some really amazing connections and friends through this process, okay? So the first one is going to be to send an audio message. So if you don't know how to send an audio message in Instagram, if you press message at the bottom of the screen, there's a little microphone button. And what you'll do is you'll hold it down and you record an audio message that gets sent to them. Now, there's a big reason that we want to use audio messages. One, text typically looks like an autoresponder or spam, and it takes longer. Two, video, sometimes people aren't ready to listen to a video and they miss the audio. They'll never be brave enough to ask you to resend the video. Plus, audio, we're podcasters, so this is our format. And when people see that little blue bubble, they know I need to turn the volume on my phone to hear this. So here's what I do. Every new follower I get, I'll go to their page. This follower's page, her name is Roxanne. So the first thing I'm going to do is try to find out your name. Your name is the sweetest word in the English language. Always be using people's names. So I find out that her name is Roxanne. I'll go to her page, I'll like a couple of the last posts and figure out what is Roxanne all about. It turns out she's a fitness instructor and a nutritionist who focuses on the ketogenic lifestyle. All right, so I know everything I need to know now. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to send her an audio message. And this is what it's going to sound like. Hey, Roxanne, it's Travis from Poddex. I am so excited to connect with you on Instagram and find out more about what you're doing with the ketogenic diet. I can't believe that you can eat fat instead of carbs and actually lose weight. I'm so interested to find out more about this. Before I go, I've got a question for you. If you had to delete all but 3 apps off your phone, what would you keep? All right, that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to promote myself, my product, my podcast, anything. I'm specifically going to show interest from a human-to-human method. Now, what this does is mind-boggling. So we've asked a question. So remember, they want to close the loop. They don't just want to not answer the question. It's going to be all they can think about. So they're going to answer the question. And now we have a genuine interaction. Now, 25% of the time, they don't do anything. 50% of the time, they'll answer. And the other 25% of the time, they'll actually thank me for the message. They'll say, thank you for that message. No one ever does that. That's amazing, right? So automatically, you're going to stand out from the crowd. The next time they see one of your posts, they're going to pay more attention to it. And using audio messages is the most underutilized tool in Instagram that you'll ever find. Okay, so the next hack I want to share with you is for getting your guest to share your episode. Podcasters are always telling me, oh, I do all these interviews, but my guests will never share my episode with their audience. And that's infuriating because you've spent this time interviewing them, researching them, sending them an email, telling them when the episode's going to release and assets, and then you go to their page on your release day with your scrolling fingers and nothing. They don't say anything. So here's what I like to do. It takes all the awkwardness out of trying to get someone to promote your podcast. After your interview's done, say, hey, before you go, I love to do this thing with my guests where I go live about a week after our episode released. And we'll just, have a brief 5 to 10 minute conversation. Are you down? They'll always say yes, unless they've got something planned. And this is super cool. So you just go into your Instagram account and go to stories and scroll over to live. When you press live, it's going to tell your audience that you're live. So it alerts everybody. Then you let your guest come on and you accept, and it tells their audience that they're live. Okay. So it automatically alerts their audience they're live with you. And here's what you can do. It's so fun. All you do is you just go on and say, hey, I had so much fun talking to you on our podcast episode that just came out on Monday. So if anyone wants to check it out, you can go check it out. But there were so many questions I didn't really get to ask you on the interview. So I wanted to do that today. Now, you could do something like going using Poddex, or you could just let your audience ask questions. You could make it a game. You could do all kinds of things. It doesn't have to be crazy long, and it doesn't have to be a recycled version of the podcast you did. It's just an additional piece of content that you can use to remind people that you did the episode together. First of all, it's so much fun. Second of all, it's super easy, and it will definitely get your podcast in the ears of their audience. So going live is one of my favorite things to do, and you can use it for so many different things, and people love when you go live and ask questions. So, do you see the power of the question? Let's review everything we talked about here. Questions can help you find your voice. Do the reps, right? Interview everyone you can and start to find your authentic style. Make great podcasts. So you have to ask and be interested and go deeper, right? If you ask those boring questions, you're going to get boring answers. And thirdly, growing your audience, use the human-to-human method. Tell people what's in it for them. What is your latest episode going to do for their life? Okay. Now, if you'd like to see more about pod decks, I've actually curated hundreds of questions just for you. I've done a bunch of research to get questions that are on the deep end of that iceberg, right? So they're going to give you a head start on being able to interview anybody, to prepare your episode, to go live and have a game. It's a lot of fun. You could check those out at poddecks.com. And Chris told me I could make you guys a crazy special offer, so I wanted to do that right now. I've got a limited quantity of our Pod Decks episode deck. This deck actually has 50 unique episode starting prompts. So if you're unsure of what the podcast about, or your guest cancels, or you just want ideas to go live with, just shuffle up this deck and you've got 50 ideas. I want to offer this to you for free. I believe in you so much, and I believe that you should sustain your podcast. I want to give you an advantage on everybody else. And because you come to Podfest, obviously you're looking to learn and grow. So I want to send you one for free. All I ask is that you pay shipping. Just go to free.poddecks.com to claim yours today. I've got a limited quantity. When they're gone, they're gone. And finally, I just wanted to say thank you. I'm so grateful to be here. Podfest is an amazing experience, and I didn't get to share everything I wanted to share with you today. So if you have questions, I'd love to hang out with you in the Q&A. And remember, you're only one episode away from your next download.